Cirque Du Freak is a 2000s fantasy horror book series written by Darren Shan. But it is also a flopped movie starring Willem Dafoe. But more importantly, I'm here to talk about the manga adaptation, which I never see anyone talk about. Some people who have read the series don't even know that it existed, which is crazy to me because it's one of the most overlooked manga adaptations that I have ever had the pleasure of reading. It is a manga series that is extremely faithful to the source material, and in my humble opinion, does everything that the book tried to do, but better. Tone feels darker, the world feels more alive, and somehow a manga based on a series meant for kids ends up dealing with subjects such as fate, war, sacrifice, in a way that doesn't seem forced. Illustrated by Takahiro Arai, a relatively unknown manga artist. Like seriously, this is the only picture I can find of this guy. It's interesting in the sense that he puts in notes at the end of each volume regarding panel decisions, creative processes, and just stuff that happened in his life during the writing of the... So in a sense, it doesn't feel like the run-of-the-mill adaptation. When you read the manga adaptation of Cirque Du Freak, you can tell that someone deeply understood the original source material and went above and beyond. So today, I'm going to walk you through the tragic saga of Darren Shan, also known as the Cirque. Our story starts off with Darren playing a game of soccer against a group of kids that are older than he is with his best friend Steve Leonard. Darren ends up destroying them, of course. On any other soccer game of this stakes, that would be fine. You would just take the L, go home. But this time, these kids had promised them $10. Big money. But they only gave them $5. So Darren obviously calls them out on this. But then they just end up pushing them to the ground, just manhandling them with pure size. Then out of nowhere, Steve sneaks in with this branch he found and whacks them. And then as they're running away, he promises to tell the world like how they lost to them and everything. Which goes to show how much of a loyal friend Steve is. Later that day, Darren goes back to Steve's house, which is odd because his room is just filled with this memorabilia of like horror movies, particularly vampires, in which he also remarks that he just loves monsters so much and that he wants to be one. We're putting that aside. We're just gonna pretend that didn't happen. That night, Darren starts to head home when he is given a paper from a man in a cloak, and then when he looks back, he's gone. The next day when he's in class, he's looking at the paper that the man gave him, and it piques the interest of his classmates, also soccer buddies. And it is revealed that this paper is actually a flyer for the Circus of Freaks, aka Cirque Du Freak, aka a freak show, and that they're going to be in town for only 1 week, un semana. But at the bottom, there's a warning that it's not for the faint-hearted. The teacher says, "Give me that," and asks where Darren has found it. And Steve, being the loyal friend he is, just takes the fall for it, takes the entire blame, and says to the teacher, "Oh, I was just gonna ask you about this flyer here later." In which the teacher is like, "Oh, I guess this is a good talking point indeed." And basically explains the whole entire history around freak shows and how they're supposed to be banned in the area they're at. The teacher keeps the paper, but as soon as the teacher's done explaining it and Steve is like done buttering him up and stuff like, "Oh, of course I'll never go," he just turns around and says, We're going. The next day, Darren and his friends ask Steve, how did it go? How did buying the tickets go? And Steve is just busy cutting this paper. Later that day, he ends up explaining that he only has 2 tickets. Turns out he put the tickets in this box filled with the paper he was cutting earlier. He climbs up a tree and says whoever catches the ticket first wins, in a sort of glorified Chuck E. Cheese ticket machine. So as he dumps tickets onto them and they're like grabbing at straws, Darren gets this voice in his head that just says to close his eyes and reach out. And then seconds pass and it says, "No!" He clasps his hands and he grabs 2. On one hand, he got nothing. And on the other hand, you guessed it, nothing! But on the other, it was the ticket. So that night, they head off to the circus. And on the way there, they find their teacher, Mr. Dorton, with police investigating the small dude in a cloak, when suddenly he picks him up and just runs off with him. They chase after him, only to find out they basically just led them to the circus. Task failed successfully, and once they're there, they're greeted by this very tall man. He asks for their tickets, and then he says the show is gonna start soon. Once they sit down, it starts with the first act being the Wolf Man. The Wolf Man is very dangerous, but he is hypnotized in a state where only loud sounds will wake him out of this hypnosis. And unfortunately, as I'm reading this, as anyone reading this, no one has time to call this bluff. Immediately into the act, a lady falls over into the stands for whatever reason. The Wolfman essentially goes berserk and rips off her arm. In the nick of time, the tall man comes over, re-hypnotizes the Wolfman, and sews her arm back together, with the help of the small dude from earlier putting her arm back on, like a piece of Lego. And it was at this point that Steve and Darren had realized that the freak show wasn't playing around, and they really are supernatural beings. They're not just regular Joe Smo freaks behind the 7-Eleven. The show proceeded without further problems, and Darren was actually liking it quite a bit, but Steve was just getting increasingly bored. Until Mr. Krebsley, aka the guy on the cover, the guy right there, the man in the flesh, came out to perform. In which, when he reveals his face, Steve is visibly shocked. And Darren points out, hey, that's the man that gave me the paper. Mr. Krebsley controls his spider, Madame Octa, via a flute, and makes the spider bite a goat. But it doesn't kill the goat, just temporarily paralyzes it. Because Mr. Krebsley had learned to control Madame Octa in a way where he can choose if it's lethal or not. He does a couple more tricks with the spider, and then eventually the act comes to a close, and the whole circus has come to a close because his act was the last. And Darren is just like starstruck here. He's like, man, I would do anything to have a spider like that. But Steve is just sitting there maniacally monologuing to himself. Oh, I have finally found the real ... And that strangeness continues when they're in the souvenir shop after the show. And he just randomly tells, hey Darren, you go home by yourself. So then Darren goes on to chase him because obviously he's wondering why. And he just gets lost in the crowd. And he continues to run after him until he realizes he has made his way on top of the balcony above the show, where he sees Steve and Mr. Krebsley talking. Steve says to him, I know who you really are. You're Vampire Verhoosten. And he proceeds to ask Mr. Krebsley to make him a vampire. All while Darren is just witnessing this whole thing. The book then cuts to Darren waking up the next day, coming to school where Steve has yet to show up, which is odd because he's not usually late. Then it cuts back to him recalling what had happened. So then Mr. Krebsley admits, yes, I am the vampire you speak of. But he's like, what is your motive for becoming a vampire? Why do you want to live in darkness for the rest of your life and not be able to see your family? In which he says none of that really matters to him except for his best friend Darren. But being a vampire means more. So then Mr. Krebsley is like, alright, I need a sample of your blood to see if you're like pure of heart, because they can detect if it's good or bad through your blood. But immediately after sampling his blood, he is just taken aback, knocks him back, says, oh, your blood is filled with malice. It's the specific thing he says is that instinct of a murderer dwells inside of you. And to put this in context, he's saying this to like a 12-year-old or 13-year-old where he's looking at him as like his idol. So, yeah, this is the start of the 12 books. Not very good. And he says there's no way he'll ever allow such a devil to become a vampire. Steve turns around, sees Darren in the corner of his eye run away. Back to the present, Steve finally shows up, and they begin to tell their friends about, the circus. Darren starts to explain how Krebsley controlled Madame Octa with the flute, but then Steve interjects and says that it was telepathy, and that anyone can control her. So, Darren has the brilliant idea to sneak into the circus. with the plans to steal Madame Octa off of Mr. Crepsley, the famous vampire that we now learn is a vampire. Sneaking past the Wolfman, getting spotted by a snake boy, he successfully steals Madame Octa and begins to learn how to control her over in the next couple of weeks, all whilst basically ghosting Steve, because he's like, I saw what happened. I know you saw me running away, but I'm just not going to acknowledge it. Until Steve hits a breaking point and finally confronts him. He's like, I know you saw everything, and accuses him of thinking he's a devil too, and believing what Mr. Crepsley said. But they make up from this. Darren said he was just afraid of being turned into a vampire. And Steve says that if he were to lose Darren as a friend, he wouldn't know what to do. After that, Darren has Steve come back to his house, where he shows him that he stole the real Madame Octa. Steve then asks Darren to control her. All is going well, you know, just regular playing around. Darren has the spider crawl onto Steve, and everything is just fun and games, fine and dandy. Until Darren's little sister just comes into the room and just shrieks at the sight of this giant spider. And this sudden sound, this sudden shriek, causes Darren to lose control. Which is not good. Not good to lose control of a very venomous spider. So Madame Octa ends up biting Steve just square in the neck, and Steve becomes unresponsive. In a fit of rage, Darren just puts the spider in the cage and throws it out the window, to which Mr. Crepsley just leaps in and catches it and flies away. Steve is then rushed to the hospital, but the doctors have no idea what to do about him. He's been bitten by the most foreign spider known to man in this universe. And Darren can't stand the wait to see what happens when he knows who can help, Mr. Crepsley. So he meets up with Mr. Crepsley and he cuts him a deal. He says, I'll give you the antidote and save your friend on one condition. You have to become a vampire and become my vampire assistant, basically for life. And Darren, being the loyal friend that he is, obliges. Mr. Crepsley then bloods him, which is the term for becoming a vampire, and Steve miraculously comes back to life. He thanks Mr. Crepsley and all, but as they're like walking off into the night, Darren takes his last chance to try to escape because he doesn't want to be a vampire for life. He just did it to save his friend. But Mr. Crepsley doesn't even bother chasing him. He's like, nothing else you can do. You're one of us now. You're crawling back soon enough. And he says this because with being a vampire, at least in this universe, there's a lot of stuff you need to know to survive. And Darren is becoming a vampire. And he thinks he's just still a regular human. So he goes to a soccer match at school, like usual. And he doesn't realize his own newfound strength. And accidentally just cuts a girl's leg, I believe, if I remember, while trying to score a goal. And out of impulse, he just runs up to her and starts like sucking the blood out of her knee. And somehow he just plays it off, just fooling everyone. Except for Steve. As the day goes on, he just gets more and more of an urge to drink blood. Even from his own sister, and he's like, enough is enough. He can't live like this around the people he cares about, because he's fearful that he's going to put them in danger. So he meets back with Mr. Crepsley, to which he says he has to have him dead, or at least appears so. And man, this next chapter was really sad when I first read it, and still is when I reread the series, because they had this man that had one final night with his family where everything was just perfect. You know, awesome dinner, playing with his little sister, just peak family bonding, all whilst he knew what he had to do at nighttime. So in the dead of the night, after appearing to go to sleep, he has Mr. Crepsley push him out the window of the second story of his house. His parents find him completely unresponsive. They had a whole funeral and the whole shebang, and he was buried. So then Mr. Crepsley comes back, digs him back up, and says, hey, you're put under a pseudo dead state and everything. You're fine, you're just a little drowsy. But they did this because if he's believed to be dead, no one's gonna go trying to look for him from now on. And all whilst he's explaining this to him, Darren starts to separate, catch his air, starts contemplating the entire catastrophe of the last month or so, and realizes he hasn't seen Steve in a long time. Until now. Because of course Steve was onto them the entire time. You see, from his perspective, Darren had just essentially betrayed him by becoming the thing that he always wanted to be. From the man that he saw called him a devil, called him filled with malice, that he was filled with malice. So he tries to kill him but can't drive the stake through his heart all the way. So then he reveals his hand, which has this cross on it, and swears upon his blood to become a vampire hunter and hunt them down to the ends of the earth, tracking them for as long as he lives until he has them both dead. And Darren doesn't tell Mr. Crepsley about this at all. Instead, he's like, "Are you hungry? I'm hungry. Let's go get something to eat." So now Darren sets off with this newfound vampire overlord, and they just walk off into the night. And that's the end of book 1. A lot to digest there. A lot of things set up for the span of 12 books. But it gets crazier. It gets much crazier. Much more. But wait, we can't forget about the author notes. This first author's note is pretty short because there's not much to go over yet. This is the first book he released, and he didn't release all 12 books at the same time. He started putting them out, in a sense. But it still, in a way, sets the tone for what's to come. So here's my best narration of this author note. I'll put it on screen as well. Suddenly, a secret story of making the manga version of Darren Shan, or something like that. In the year 2005, there is a frog who agonized at the end of the year. I can't get the name. In January of 2006, a call from the manager comes in. "Do you know about Darren Shan?" While talking to the manager, he gets down to the names of the first and the second chapter. Apparently, there will be several candidates, and from them, they'll get the original author Darren Shan's input and pick one. The frog's fired up. May of 2006, he completes the storyboard. Trepidation abounds. In June of 2006, the frog hurriedly moves to the workplace. However, during the second year, he catches a rare illness and that's not funny. He catches a rare illness and is put out of commission to distribute much of the work to my family. Incidentally, my younger brother also participated in the storyboard contest for the manga-ization of Darren Shan. I added some of his production in the first episode, since his was better. Specifically, the scene where Darren gets the ticket. He is also in charge of the character designs for Hans and Ribs and the main backdrop designs. This manga is thanks to my brother, the staff, and my manager who helped me with the drawing. The translation is not the best. Who helped me with the drawing, my family, and my friends who support. Ribbit. Darren Shan, who made this beautiful story, and the many people who were involved in this book, all the readers. I'll work my hardest as not to disappoint you all. Please grant me your support so that I can continue to draw this magnificent tale. Very heartfelt, very heartfelt. So now Volume 2 basically starts directly off of Volume 1, where it began. Sometimes in the story there will be time skips, but in this case it just starts directly after the first. So as I said, Volume 2. Hold on now, something isn't right here. Why does he sound like Disclaimer, you might want to turn your volume down on this part of the video because I messed up the audio. When I first recorded it, I had the gain turned up way too much, and I try to fix it in post, so hopefully it's better. So just bear with me for this volume. I promise it will be better in the other ones. 2, The Vampire Assistant starts directly off of Volume 1, where we see this old man walking in the forest. Now, this old man sees Darren and he's confused because it's just a kid walking around. But little does he know this is all a ruse for Mr. Crepsley to come in and knock him out for his blood. Now, at this point in the story, Darren can't drink blood. Not physically, but mentally, because he still sees himself as a human. He doesn't see himself as a vampire who drinks blood. So, as any person would be, he is disgusted by, the sight of blood, drinking blood and everything. But eventually he will need to consume blood to survive. So then there's a small time skip about 2 months into the future, and Darren mentions that they've been traveling a lot. He still despises Mr. Krebsley for what he did to him, and he's even thought about killing him in his sleep because he totally could. But the thing is, he can't because he needs Mr. Krebsley to survive. And that brings me to one interesting detail about Darren being only
half vampire, is that he can go out during the day, but Mr. Krebsley as a full vampire can't go out during the day. So while it's daytime, Mr. Krebsley sleeps, but Darren an explorer.
So he does so by going to the nearby town, with the mindset that he's still like half vampire, but not like actually. He ends up trying again to play a game of soccer with some kids he had found. And he ends up basically breaking one of their legs and gets called a monster and gets shunned off. So he has to go back to Krebsley like, big whoopsie, I just broke this kid's leg because I forgot I'm half vampire and all. But more importantly, he expresses to Mr. Krebsley that even though he's half vampire, he's still human underneath and he earns connection, he needs friends. So Mr. Krebsley comes to the conclusion, okay, you can't have human friends, why don't we go back to the Cirque where they're not humans and we can find some friends for you there. So now Darren is feeling a whole slew of emotions. On one hand, he's excited because of the possibility of making new friends, but on the other hand, he is nervous that the freaks will even accept him. When they arrive, they meet up with Mr. Tall, the head honcho of the Cirque Du Freak, and also the guy and accepted Steve and Darren's tickets when they initially went to the Cirque. Mr. Krebsley discusses coming back to Mr. Tall, and he's excited and remarks that him and Magnum Octo would be a great addition to the show again. They've been understaffed and, well, quite honestly, they needed something like this. They go over logistics, mainly where Darren's gonna stay, and Krebsley ends up settling on having him share a tent with not Theo Von, Evra Von, the snake boy that Darren ran into earlier when he went to steal Madame Octa from Mr. Krebsley. Almost immediately, Darren begins to fit into this crowd of people and becomes good company with everyone, whilst helping them take care of chores and duties around the Cirque. One day, while Darren and Evra are doing chores, they notice a kid in the bushes clearly spying on them. So naturally, as anyone would, they go over and try pulling a quick prank on him. To their surprise, the kid doesn't really fall for it. He sort of just laughs it off and introduces himself as Sam Grest. Sam wants to join the Cirque and he's enamored by it, but Darren and Evra insist that it's not as great as he thinks it is. And to prove that, they give him a personal tour. And then he becomes more enamored with the idea of joining the Cirque. But regardless, Darren is happy nonetheless to have another person that he can call a friend. Later that day, while Darren is going on about how excited he is to join the actual circus, Evra freezes up when he sees an old man with a group of hooded figures walking behind him. He tells Darren that the man's name is Desmond Tiny, or Mr. Tiny for short. And even though that he looks like a harmless old guy, he's nothing but bad news. Evra tells Darren that even Mr. Tall gets uneasy whenever Mr. Tiny comes around, which is only every couple years or so, and generally that everyone gets uncomfortable when he comes around. And later that night when they're in their tent, a man comes up to their tent with a message. Mr. Tall wants the both of you to come to the trailer because Mr. Tiny has a message. Evra warns Darren to not talk back, just say, "Yes, sir," and just be quiet. They meet him in the trailer where you immediately see that Mr. Tiny carries a rather peculiar watch in the shape of an actual heart. He goes on to explain how he knows about Darren's sacrifice that he made for Steve, and he knows how reluctant he has been to drink blood lately, in which he actually agrees that it's quite disgusting to drink blood. Only exception is young children. Darren is just flabbergasted and says, "You can't drink blood from children, they'll die." And Mr. Tiny's like, "What's wrong with that?" The real reason that Mr. Tiny has called them in, besides aura farming, is to tell them that they'll be tending to his little people, aka those hooded figured little hooded men who walk around or whatever. And before they leave, Darren snaps and he asked, "Why do you call them little people?" I guess he found the terminology quite degrading. This enrages Tiny. He says, All this chirping and twittering. This bird had better learn to keep his beak shut. Basically saying to Darren, don't test your luck. Darren, the stoic, red-pilled, based Giga Chad he is, Darren, the brave person he is, says, why don't you make me? So Mr. Tiny begins to squeeze his heart clock, and Darren just collapses to the floor. He feels it in the chest, but it doesn't kill him. After that ordeal, Mr. Krebsley just says to him, no studies, just go straight to bed for tomorrow. And Everett remarks to Darren that he was crazy for what he had done. Darren says that he felt something truly awful emanating from that man. And I say no, something black and something evil.
It's scary, it's black, it's gonna destroy you.
Mr. Tiny left the circus that night, and the next morning their service to the little people began. It's a monumental task just to prepare their food. They don't speak a word, they just eat in silence. Everett says he's never even saw them speak, ever. All whilst this is happening, Darren is slowly getting weaker and weaker from his reluctancy to drink blood. Later that day, Sam introduces Darren and Everett to his friend Reggie, this huge bearded man who claims to be an eco-warrior. Eco as in for the forest and nature and stuff. And they invite Sam and Reggie to the show later that night. The circus tent was packed to the brim, and needless to say, Darren was quite excited. Although, when it's Darren's turn to control the spider, he has some intrusive thoughts in his head. At the back of his mind, he knows that this could be his chance to kill Mr. Krebsley because he is controlling the spider in the act. But ultimately, he doesn't follow through with it for whatever reason. After the act, Mr. Krebsley explains to Darren that he actually knew about his thoughts during the act, and that he even drained the spider's fangs before the show. And that it had all been like a big scheme or test. Some way to test Darren. And he wakes up the next morning, and it would be an understatement to say that he woke up on the wrong side of the bed the next morning, because he woke up to Mr. Krebsley forcefully feeding him blood. He explains to him that obviously if he won't drink blood, he'll die, and that drinking blood isn't necessarily evil. He then goes on to even say that when a vampire drinks the blood of someone before they die, they even absorb some of their memories and feelings, making them live on inside of them. All in all, Mr. Krebsley says, well, I can't force you to drink blood. It's either you do and you live, or you don't and you die. Later that day, Darren runs into Sam and asks him what he and Reggie, thought of the show. And Sam's like, oh, we loved it. It was great and all, but RV was a little upset at the part when the goat died, and Evra's part, and Madame Octa's part. But he especially couldn't stand seeing the Wolfman locked in the cage. And Darren has this moment of realization, like, of course RV didn't like the show, he's an eco-warrior. He risks his life to fight for animals in the environment. He shouldn't have invited him. Besides that, Sam is only more enamored to join the circus, and he still insists upon doing it. So Darren finally sort of gives in and says, okay, I'll put in the word to Mr. Krebsley, to which he's like, no way, Jose. He is a child and more importantly, a human. Humans and vampires simply can't coexist. But Darren is insistent on giving him at least a chance. So Mr. Krebsley says, alright, but on one condition, he has to be a vampire too. So Darren goes back to Sam, and he's thinking, I can't put him through the same pain that I've been through becoming a vampire. So he leads them out to this road and just says, go home. And that you aren't allowed to join. And he's just crushed. He's like, how come? Did you explain that I was a hard worker? Did you? But it doesn't matter. Darren essentially lies and says that he becomes a monster at night, similar to the Wolfman. And that he gets out of control and he eats people and he needs to be caged up. And he convinces Sam to run away from the lonely world that Darren lives in. While heading back, he stumbles into RV in the forest, and he's just irate. He tries swinging at Darren with a log while saying, how could they treat the Wolfman the way they did? Darren tries to explain to him, no, you don't understand. If he wasn't caged up, he would just be killing humans left and right. So RV's like, well, so be it. I defend all the poor and innocent animals in the world. And a matter of fact, I'm calling the police on you, while grabbing a hold of Darren. And Darren puts RV in his place by picking him up and throwing him into the lake, and he runs away while calling him a monster. You can see there's a common theme of just people calling Darren a monster throughout the entire book, at least throughout these first couple of novels.
What if I'm the monster?
So later that night, Darren explains the whole ordeal to Mr. Tall and how the police can be on their tail. And Mr. Tall agrees to move venues and says, "Oh, I've done this rodeo before." Of course, being a freak show, the police is on our tail constantly. So they start packing their things, and later on, while they're packing up, we find out that Sam wasn't actually moved at all by what Darren said, and has sneaked into the circus again with hopes of joining them, basically not taking no for an answer. And at this point, Darren is essentially on his last legs from not drinking any blood. So much so that even Evra notices it. And even Evra tries to console him, saying he won't be evil for drinking a little bit of blood just to keep him alive, thinking of it as like medicine to take. But Darren is still persistent on the idea of no blood for me. But while Darren is walking around the circuit for the last time, observing the people pack up the things, he hears the sound of chains clanking and has to investigate. And he thinks he knows exactly what's going on. He turns the corner and stumbles in the RV with a pair of bolt cutters, attempting to set the Wolfman free. Darren's like, "Stop, what are you doing?" And RV is like delirious, says that he already called the police and that they're finished. Darren tries to warn him that the Wolfman will literally kill him if he tries to free him. And what do you know? He opens up the cage with his bolt cutters, frees the Wolfman, and he bites off both of his hands, like deep into his forearms, both of them. And I don't know if it's like a state of shock or delusion, but RV just ends up running into the forest. And that's the last we ever see of him. But now we have worse problems on hand, because now that murderous Wolfman is just set free into the night. But Darren's wondering why the Wolfman didn't attack him. He looks around and finds this bag with pickled onions in it, and a name stitched into it. And it read, Sam Grest. He was now in trouble. Darren runs off to find a train station where Sam had been hiding in, tracking his scent to find him. He finds Sam curled up with a bent metal rod inside of the train station, and he's very grateful that he's alive. But the Wolfman is still on the loose, and they hear him howling just outside. Now Darren is put in the position where he has to defend Sam with all of his might, or whatever might he has left. And sorry to break it to you, but it doesn't go well. The Wolfman just slashes Darren's arm and it breaks like a twig. And he falls to the floor and he looks up to see that Sam didn't run off like he had told him to, and that he's actually attempting to fight the wolf, in which he actually gets a hit in with the metal rod. Darren blacks out again, and then he opens his eye to the gruesome image of Sam being eaten alive by the Wolfman. Darren gets up, bashing the Wolfman's head with a rock, trying to save Sam, and Mr. Krebsley jumps in at the nick of time to disarm the Wolfman. However, it wasn't fast enough, as Darren looks back to see Sam in his seemingly final moments. He says that he's sorry that he snuck back and that he just wanted to be with him. Darren begs Mr. Krebsley to use his spit, which the vampire spit basically like seals up wounds, and he begs Mr. Krebsley to seal him back up, but he says that it's simply too late to do so, as the Wolfman had essentially ate most of his organs. But there is one thing Darren can do. Since Sam's death is unavoidable, Darren has the option to drink Sam's blood and absorb his spirit, allowing Sam to live on inside of him. Darren pleads not to, but Sam says if he can live on inside of him, he wants him to drink the blood of him so he can be with Evra and Darren forever. So Darren just gives in, and he drinks Sam's blood, absorbing a part of his spirit to live on with him as long as he lives. His last words were, "I had fun and I'm glad to have met you, Darren." Mr. Krebsley had just merely knocked out the Wolfman, and they had recaged him and packed him up, Evra had told Darren. Evra tells Darren that Sam was firmly buried with the help of a little man with a limp. He had noted him being different from the rest of the little people. He also tells Darren that they had tipped the police off to where his remains were, and that they'll soon find him and give him a proper ceremony. Everett had saved Sam's bag along with the pickled onions in it, which Darren would eat on the way to their next city. And just like that, that's how Volume 2 ends. Very sad at the end, and really pounds down the theme of how Darren has to learn that he's not really human anymore. He's more vampire than he would like to admit. Okay, no more sadness. No more sadness because we get to talk about my favorite, well, one of my favorite volumes, Volume 3, Tunnels of Blood. One of my favorite books, at least out of the 3 first novels, due to the tension and the artwork in this city in wintertime resembling London. And it is also the first major time skip that we see, taking a year after Sam's death. However, this volume doesn't start in the city right away. Instead, it starts out with the gang visiting this rundown warehouse, along with this little person they have named Lefty. Which, yes, it is the same little person who helped bury Sam and has a limp. Since the last volume, Darren has now clarified after drinking Sam's blood, he is now taken on the full vampire way, aka just drinking human blood like he was supposed to this whole time. Which this is good because not only is his mind sharper, but now he can use his abilities to the fullest now, or as full as a half vampire's abilities are. He also explains that him and Mr. Crepsley are all around on better terms, him seeing him as more of a mentor of life now. His like Mr. Miyagi, except as Mr. Miyagi kind of feigned his death, took him away from his family and everything he loved. Anyways, while discussing this upcoming show in this rundown warehouse, Darren and Crepsley are suddenly held by knife point by this mysterious man who's actually just an old friend of Mr. Crepsley. Crepsley notes that he heard his breathing from a mile away. This guy with the heavy breathing goes by the name of Gavner Pearl, this vampire general. Vampire generals are basically these people that monitor the behaviors of the vampires in the vampire clan. Crepsley says if they find any of the vampires just slaughtering innocents or using their powers for evil purposes, they have the ability to judge their actions and act upon them, aka killing the offending vampire. Gaviner takes notice to Darren's blooding scars on his fingertips, and he is just appalled, saying, "He's nothing but a boy." But Crepsley's just like, "Oh, it's a long story," and that he'll have to meet with the council members of the clan to eventually be judged. Mr. Crepsley is surprised, thinking that's the reason he came to meet with them in the first place, but it was not, as he asks to speak with them away from Darren for some time. So Darren ends up just performing by himself and comes to the warehouse later to meet with Gavner, in which Gavner asks Darren to have a conversation, and he goes on to explain that he never really should have been blooded in the first place, you don't think, but it's because children don't typically understand the dangers and risks that they're taking on, and in the vampire society, clan, whatever, there's actually a rule against it. But on the bright side, Gavner highly doubts that Mr. Crepsley is going to be punished for blooding him because he's just like that highly ranked among the vampires. He's just so well respected that he can just wiggle his way through it. He even goes on to say that he was a very prestigious vampire leader and vampire general at one point, nearly being voted Vampire Prince, which is the upper echelon, most prestigious role a vampire can attain. It's basically like being the president. But then he just stepped down and vanished for no reason, not explaining why. Darren asks to hear more, but Gavner says he'll scalp him if he found out he told him all of this. All in all, Gavner leaves Darren with some affirming parting words. That's what I was. So some affirmable to a word, some comforting parting word, and basically tells him that he can trust Mr. Crepsley and that he's possibly the best vampire teacher he can ever ask for. And he warns, well, this is in a little bit of a not comforting part, he warns Darren that they'll be on the move soon. Story has to go somewhere, which of course happened to be true because as soon as Mr. Crepsley come back, He's like, pack your things, boy, we're going somewhere. Like I didn't already explain it, sort of in the intro. But Darren doesn't want to be alone, so Mr. Krebsley allows him to bring Evra with. And Evra's just ecstatic because he's only ever been in the circus, never experiencing regular life. So Evra, Krebsley, Darren say their farewells to the circus to go to this city that Mr. Krebsley has to urgently be at. Darren and Evra, when they first got to the city, were essentially living the dream. Because Mr. Krebsley being a vampire, he just slept the whole day away every single day. So they were just left to their lonesome to do whatever they wanted. They explored the city, watch movies, play video games, eat, sleep, repeat, Walmart tea. However, eerily every night, Mr. Krebsley would just vanish into the city, not saying a word until he came back the following morning. But they didn't really pay any mind to it because of all the fun they've been having. They had been in the city for a while as it began to snow and Christmas was just around the corner. Darren would go out shopping for Christmas presents even though Evra and Krebsley didn't celebrate. And he ran into this girl named Debbie Hemlock, who commented on his vampire attire saying saying he looked like a pirate. She says she was just shopping for gloves, and Darren says he was shopping for Christmas presents for his brother. And she's like, oh, the one in the hood? Signifying that she has saw them before. Darren is shocked, thinking this is like some weird stalker lady, but Debbie says that she lives near town square and just saw them from her window. She asks if she could shop with them, because maybe she can help pick out a gift, to which he of course obliges. He opens the door and she says, if you keep acting like a gentleman, people will think you have a crush on me. The signs are signing. Anyways, they talk for a bit. Darren builds like this false story and excuses. Like his dad works a lot during the day. That's why he's always left at the hotel. And eventually they come across the CD player. This would be the perfect gift for Evra because he loves music. Darren ends up walking her home, and before she goes inside, she ends up basically coaxes him into asking her to take her to the movies. For which she then says, I'll think about it. Like she didn't lead him into asking the question. Anyways, the next day while Darren is prepping for his movie date with Evra, they begin to see Mr. Krebsley walk out the door as usual. Darren asks Krebsley if he can fix him something to eat, to which he says, I'll have to be going immediately. Evra comments that he's been getting worried about him. It's finally starting to set in that it's kind of weird. The movies go well, although Darren wasn't impressed by the monster in it. They went back to her house and he got to meet her parents. She asks him if he'll be over to Christmas, in which he says yes. He even scores a kiss. He is excited, coming back to the hotel, saying to Evra, you won't believe what happened. Chris Rock slapped Will Smith at the Oscars. No, it was about the kiss. But Evra is deadpan, looking at the TV, asking if he saw the news. On the news, the reporter says that 6 bodies was found in this building. All the corpses had their necks slit, with their blood being completely drained from their bodies. So I'm sure you could put the dots together. At this point, they're seriously starting to consider that Mr. Krebsley is the one behind these murders, but they don't know for sure. So they start tracking, or not really tracking him, I guess staking him out. The first 2 nights was a failure, but little by little they started picking up his patterns, all while staying out of his sense range. In the last few nights, Darren has picked up on 2 patterns. He either stands above silently watching the crowds below, or restlessly prowls through the streets below, almost as if he was looking for someone, or possibly his next victim. Still with this night shift staking ordeal that they had to partake in every single night, Darren had still made time for Debbie in the day, with her essentially being his girlfriend. And even though he knows that this can't possibly last forever, he still enjoys spending time with her. One night, Krebsley starts acting different, as in he starts following this specific person. Darren wonders if this is his next victim. He goes into this fish factory and Mr. Krebsley is just peering over the place. They wonder if he's just waiting for him to come out or not, but it's really too hard to tell. But suddenly the man comes out and Mr. Krebsley is on the move. The two panic because He starts heading directly over to where they're at, but seemingly he walks past them without batting an eye. Darren says that there must be something wrong with Mr. Krebsley, that he's putting this much focus on this person, because any other time he would have just easily noticed. The man walks into this apartment complex. Darren and Evra are ready to make a move, but then out of nowhere, Mr. Krebsley just turns around and walks away. Now, granted, they're happy about his change of heart, but they're still concerned about his intentions. The next night was December 21, and Mr. Krebsley was still on this man's tail. Darren is nearly positive that he's trying to kill this man. So, armed with a knife, he says to Evra to stay back if he makes a move, because since he's not half vampire, he just stands no chance. So the next night after that, Mr. Krebsley finally makes a move whilst in the fish factory. He tells Evra to head back to the hotel as he left his gift for him there, and that he'll call him if he comes back alive. Surrounded by hanging fish, Darren watches the victim and Mr. Krebsley, knife in his suit. In his mind, he is begging him not to do it, but unfortunately Mr. Krebsley lunges forward. But Darren is prepared, coming at him with the knife. He misses, and Krebsley yells, "Darren, what are you doing here?" And suddenly through the rooftop, a ginormous monster just comes crashing through. Noticing their presence, he roars and jumps back up to the rooftop and escapes. The random dude, clearly in distress at seeing all this take place, is just standing there and sobbing, to which Mr. Krebsley basically gasses him with his breath. Mr. Krebsley is just irate, telling Darren that because of him, a murderous psychopath has just waltzed off scot-free. Darren realizes that he has made a grave mistake, but he tells Mr. Krebsley, what else was he supposed to think when Mr. Krebsley would just go off every night, saying nothing, and all they hear from the news is that people are getting drained of their blood. Mr. Krebsley realizes his mistake and says, "You guys are right. It was stupid of me to not tell you what was going on." So then he begins to explain everything. The monster they saw is named Merlot. He is a Vampanese, or Vampanese. It's like chimpanzee, Japanese, but Vampanese. Yeah. And Darren's like, what the heck is a Vampanese? Back in the day, vampires looked down upon humans and fed on them similar to how humans feed on animals. And it wasn't uncommon for vampires to drain a few people per week. However, wars, famine, plagues threatened the human population on several occasions. Even vampires originally came from humans, so they forbade the needless killing of humans. Most vampires were content with this, but some were not. They felt that something had been taken away from them. So 700 years prior, those vampires who disagreed broke off and became their own independent race, establishing themselves as the Vampanese, as well as establishing their own rules and governing body. They believed there was shame in only taking a little bit of blood at a time, but there was nobility in draining a full entire human of their blood and their spirit, as Darren had did to Sam, but they kill every time they feed. With that disagreement in beliefs caused a huge war, with blood being shed on both sides in vast numbers. The vampires could have won if they didn't stop. However, the very humans they're trying to protect got in the way, and they couldn't tell the difference in between the races. So when Vampanese started slaughtering humans left and right, humans couldn't tell the difference, and they went against both of the races indiscriminately, resulting in the vampires almost being wiped out. So in the end, vampires and Vampanese came together and agreed to a truce. For centuries, they maintained this separation, so much so that monsters like Merlot were able to evolve, bearing purple skin and red eyes. But Merlot had basically gone mad and has been on a killing streak. The more blood he consumed, the more mad he became and the more powerful he would become. Thus why Mr. Krebsley had planned to kill him, until Darren messed everything up. On the left cheek of the man that Mr. Krebsley was following was a marking from Merlot. This was the Vampanese way of marking their prey, as they always killed in advance. Merlot's being 3 scratches, which is how Mr. Krebsley was able to discern the exact person that Merlot was hunting. With that being said, Mr. Krebsley just said that he's just going to have to settle. Darren is confused because why would he let this murderous psychopath on the loose just because of one little hiccup? But Mr. Krebsley says that if he does, it will cause a war, and that all he's concerned about now is leaving the city as soon as possible. So Darren begs to question why get involved at all. And he says it is because this is the city that he was originally born in. He lived here as a human, so he holds sentiment to this place, and he says that it's the only place that really feels like home, and that Gaviner had alerted him about Merlot in the first place. Mr. Krebsley says that they'll return to the Cirque promptly, but he also doesn't mind staying for Christmas, as he had known Darren yapping about it constantly. But wait! He has all forgotten about Evra. He goes looking for him, seeing that he left his phone behind. And Mr. Krebsley says they still smell Merlot's scent. So that means Evra could have possibly just been killed by Merlot. Darren didn't sleep the following night, being seen by Debbie in shambles. When she asked if he will be bringing his brother and dad for Christmas, he just says, "I don't know," and runs away. While running, he ran over a talking sewer drain, aka Merlot in the sewers. He commented that his girlfriend looks tastier than Evra. Apparently, he had been torturing Evra, pulling the scales off of his body, one by one. And he says that he plans to keep him alive until Christmas. Merlot went to say that if he wants Evra alive, that he has to bring Mr. Krebsley to him. But Darren doesn't budge, and this makes Merlot angry. He says that he'll instead kill Evra, him, his girlfriend, and Mr. Krebsley on Christmas instead. After that, Darren had gotten back with Mr. Krebsley to tell him that Merlot was definitely still in the city. So they got a new hotel where Merlot couldn't see them from the sewers, and they began to plan on finding his hideout. But it didn't go all too well, because the sewers are just too vast and complex to search through. So back at the hotel, Darren is just breaking down, and not the dancing kind, because every single friend he's had up until this point, or every single friendship he's had up to this point, has just gone terribly wrong. So he has this moment, and it isn't entirely explained if it's just in his head or not, but he basically talks to Sam's spirit and asks him for guidance. And he basically comes to the conclusion with Sam that Merlot must be starving, because Merlot can't drink Evra's blood, or Krebs, it's basically like poison to him either way. So he thinks he can use that against him. So next day, Christmas Day, Darren calls Debbie and apologizes for the whole running away thing from yesterday, and clarifies that he and only himself will be over for Christmas Eve. Mr. Krebsley even helps Darren pick out a fancier wine as a gift for the parents. Whilst at the house, Darren explains to Debbie that after today he'll be leaving town, and his dad just announces, "Alas, fate has driven the young romantics apart." Love the dad. Just lovely stuff all in all, and the night goes well. And he even receives a gift from her, that being a ring. But of course, all good things must come to an end, especially when your friend is underground getting tortured by a giant monster as we speak. So right after dinner, it was go time. And also, I can't see it now, like on screen, but I know in this part of the story, there's this panel where Mr. Krebsley is just posted up. It's like, press E to save your friend. So now in the sewer, Darren is just racing off, and Mr. Krebsley is warning him to slow down. He has to use his flashlight because he is out of battery. They get in a minor scuffle and just completely break the flashlight. And Mr. Krebsley gets angry at him for breaking, but he is indifferent as he starts to run off, saying that he'll just find Ever on his own. Until eventually, he runs into Merlot, and Merlot just gasses him with his breath. Yeah, the Vampanese can do it too. He wakes up tied upside down by his ankles, and the first thing he sees is Merlot brandishing the skull, saying, "Hey look, it's Evra's skull, haha, lol." Of course it wasn't Evra's, because Evra is right beside him, tied up as well. And Darren and Merlot have this long back and forth, but for the sake of brevity, I'll just summarize it for you. Basically, Darren argues that if Merlot kills him, he'll have Krebsley come down with the vampire generals and basically just slime him out. Merlot believes him, but he says that doesn't stop him from killing Evra since he's not a vampire and he doesn't matter. So Darren's like, wait, no, I have something better, something you can actually consume. Debbie's blood. And Evra's just shocked at the proposal, but Merlot is more than happy and calls it a deal. So that night, Darren leads Merlot to the apartment. Merlot's like, I can already smell the blood. They make their way up the stairs, and when they enter the room, he ties up Darren, saying he wants him to watch as he steals her soul. And if he doesn't, he'll go straight to the parents' bedroom and kill them too. Merlot walks to bed, holding daggers in each hand, and brutally stabs the bed. But he notices something's off. Tearing the sheet off, it is now apparent that the Debbie he just stabbed into was actually just pillows. Merlot hears a voice coming from the bedroom closet saying, the date just changed. Merry Christmas, Merlot. Out came Mr. Krebsley, and Darren narrates, in movies, I had seen creatures of the dark trade foul insults as a tense, close battle played out over long minutes. However, in real life, the fight lasted no more than 2 seconds. After unraveling Darren, Merlot egged Darren to come closer, to which he did for him just to say, clever boy. And then he flops over and dies. The entire night had been planned by Mr. Krebsley the whole time. The scuffle in the sewers, leading them to be separated, planned. The fancy wine Mr. Krebsley had given Darren was laced with a sleeping potion to knock out the parent and Debbie. They then drew a little bit of Debbie's blood onto the sheets to mislead Merlot. Before leaving, Darren would decorate the Christmas tree and leave it in Debbie's room for when she were to awake, kissing her on the forehead and leaving her and the city for good. On the train, Darren of course explained to Evra the whole thing, how it was all planned and that he wasn't a monster sacrificing Debbie and everything. But more importantly, he had remembered to bring Evra's gift, as well as Mr. Krebsley. This volume would end with Darren thanking Debbie for the ring he had received. And I just gotta say, once again, this is one of the reasons why this is my favorite in the series. The whole plot twist at the end, the introduction of the Vampanese. This is when the story begins to be really fleshed out. There's actual world building. We got backstory on Mr. Krebsley too. Bunch of things. But there's a reason why I said this isn't my favorite yet. Because the series definitely doesn't peak here. We still got 6 more volumes to go. And it only gets more crazy from this point on. So, originally I was gonna record all of the books in one big long video essay documentary sort of thing, but then I realized that recording all 12 books in one video in one big thing is actually hard and time consuming. So much so that this project has taken 4 or 5 months for just the first 3 books, it looks like, and a lot of that can be accounted to classic burnout mixed with demotivation, deadly combo, but very effective. So I have made the executive decision to release the next ones in increments of 3, because it seems like originally these novels were released in increments of 3 when they came out, like as box sets. So I was like, plot wise, it would fit that way if I were to release them in 3, even though I much rather prefer to release them in one big video because no one likes going through a playlist of videos. But there's a reason people release videos in segments, and I've learned that now. So yeah, if you got this far, thank you for watching all the way through to the end. This is probably the biggest project I've taken up on this channel thus far, besides the last video. The last video took a while too, but hopefully I plan on continuing this series eventually, and otherwise I'll be dropping other videos as well. So yeah, see you next time on the next Saga of Darren Shan.